Well, tonight we are looking at Revelation chapter 1. Revelation chapter 1, I've got circled verse number 17. We'll wrap up chapter 1 this evening and should cover the letter to the church at Ephesus. That's chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. So, a lot to talk about tonight, and if we don't get all the way through, that's fine. We'll see what we can study and learn together. We know that John wrote Revelation. We've talked about that. He's introduced himself. We see in chapter 1 that he has a vision. It is a vision of the Lord. And this is initially directed to the 7 churches that are in Asia. Again, we have those in chapters 2 and 3. We'll talk about the letters when we get there. But just a spectacular, I guess, is under emphasis. Sometimes you can't think of the word you need, but just a tremendous view of the Lord and a vision of Him. And John's reaction to that we see in verse 17. And Adam, if you will, let's start by reading Revelation 1, 17 through 20, and then we'll go back and look at each verse.
Down through verse 20.
Yes,
And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp two-edged sword, and his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead, and he laid his right hand upon me, saying unto me, Fear not, I am the first and the last. I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and have the keys of hell and of death. Write the things which thou hast seen, and the things which are, and the things which shall be hereafter. The mystery of the 7 stars which thou sawest in my right hand, and the 7 golden candlesticks. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 candlesticks which thou sawest are the 7 churches.
All right, so back in verse 17 is where we want to again pick up. John's reaction to seeing the Lord, the text says he fell at his feet as dead. What would that indicate? Surprise, being overwhelmed. In the Old Testament, we read of several individuals who encountered the Lord, Abraham, Moses, and others, and the Bible says they fell on their face.
That's
reverence. A healthy reverence and respect and awe and wonder. Really no words to describe it. I think one translation renders this, I fell at his feet as a dead man. As a dead man. That's just a tremendous, fear has a tremendous effect on the physical body. The mental emotion of fear can affect your physical body. I know I've told this many times before, but when I think about fear, I think about myself, and it wasn't that many years ago, a grown man, and the ladies had a ladies' day on Saturday, and I came up here Friday night to sort of check things out. I had the doors to the auditorium closed, and I had the lights on back there, and I peeped in, and I saw somebody white standing in front of the auditorium. And you talking about hairs on the back of your neck sticking up, and you know, who on earth is up there, or what on earth is up there? And I thought, well, I might turn the lights on. Of course, they had a mannequin. I don't know what on earth they had a mannequin for. They had a mannequin up there. It wasn't anybody, but I sure thought it was somebody or something. That has to be the most frightened I've ever been as an adult. I didn't know they had that up there. And like I say, when I got home, I let Tanya have it for not telling me about that. Well, that's the idea here. I mean, that's just, and it may be if by the grace of God we get to heaven, we'll fall down too. In awe, in reverence, in fear, and respect. And I mean, when you come in the presence of the Almighty, that certainly is deserving of that. And as we know, the Almighty really is always with us. He is here right now. Every time we worship Him, He is with us. And so we don't want to lose that sense of reverence. Even though we can't see him with the eye, we know the Lord is among us. And it certainly is a blessing. Well, the response of Jesus is, John, what? Don't be afraid. Fear not. Easier said than done. But the Lord says, do not fear. In other words, he's comforting John. I'm not going to hurt you. You're not going to die. Many times when Jesus was on earth, he told his disciples, don't be afraid. When they were out in the boat and the sea was stormy and Jesus walked to them on the water to the boat, he said, don't be afraid. It'd be hard not to do, wouldn't it? You don't see somebody walking on the water every day. But he said, don't be afraid. He told the disciples, I'm about to die and go to heaven. And his response was to them, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. John chapter 14. So these are comforting words to us today. Fear not. I think there's, I don't know if we would say human nature, but there's just an instinct within us to certainly be respectful of certain things. And so we know that we have the Lord on our side, we're on his side. And so when the Lord is there, he can care for us. So don't be afraid, John. I am the first and I'm the last. Have we heard that before? Maybe we've heard that several times before already, haven't we? Verse 11 is one, and verse 8, I believe, is another, beginning and the ending, first and last. In other words, I'm going to be here. I am always here. Those pagan rulers who were giving them all sorts of trouble at the time John wrote this and had this vision, those pagan rulers would not be always there. Persecution would one day end. And so, as they dealt with that, again, I'm going to be there for you. I'm here for you now, and I'll be there for you this side of that. You know, what's happening in Ukraine one day is going to end. It's not going to last forever. It may seem to them like it's lasting forever, and we can talk about that with ease, again, thousands of miles away from them, but it will one day come to an end. I saw part of the History Channel, The Dark Ages, the other day. And you're talking about some tough times. When the Roman Empire collapsed in 410 to about, I don't know, Adam knows more about that than I do, but for many, many years, those folks had some tough times. And it was plagues, and then there were Vikings, and then there were other type of just brutal people. But, you know, people thought it was going to last forever, but they finally turned the corner. And Europe saw a better day coming. So the Lord says, I'm going to be there. When it's all said and done, I'm the first, I'm the last, I'm the ever-present one. Verse 18, I am he who that liveth. I am is what tense? Present tense. I am alive. I am living. I was dead. Of course, that refers to his cross, the crucifixion. Exactly right. I was dead, but I'm not dead anymore. My body's not the tomb. I'm very much alive. I am alive. Most folks can't say I am alive if they've died. They won't be able to say that until the great resurrection. But Jesus can say, I am alive. I am the living one. In fact, I am alive, what? Forever. I am alive forevermore. That tells us that the cross of Jesus was a one-time event. He will not be crucified again. No more crucifixions for the Lord. Hebrew writer speaks of Jesus once offering himself as a sacrifice. One time, Hebrews chapter 9, verse 28, I believe it is. So, I am alive. I'm not going to die anymore. I am alive forevermore. Amen. And I have the keys of hell and of death. If you have a different translation, how does your 18, verse 18, end there at the end? I have the keys of hell and of death. Hades. Okay. instead of the word hell there. And the word hell in the King James Version had different meanings back then. We normally limit in our English language today the word hell to the place of eternal torment, but not so when this translation was made. But first of all, I have the keys. If you have the keys to something, what does that mean? That means that you can open it. You have the authority to open it. Tanya, myself, Adam, Abby, Bryant, you know when you're in the family whenever you get a key to the house, right? We have the key to open our house. That means we have the authority to open our house. You have a key to your automobile. Although these days, some vehicles you don't need a key, do you? You just press a button. But in any event, you have the authority to open that vehicle and drive that vehicle. Jesus promised the apostles he would give them the keys to what? The kingdom. Upon this rock I will build my church, and I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, the church. And Peter and the apostles opened those keys, or used those keys to open the church in Acts chapter 2 as they preached the gospel message. So if you have, the point we're making is, if you have the key to something, that means you have the right to open that something. And so here Jesus says, I have, you don't have them, John, but I have, first of all, the keys of hell or Hades. The word Hades literally means unseen. Unseen. And it refers to the unseen realm where the spirits of men go, where the spirits of people go when they die. In this life, we can't see that. We've never seen Hades. We can't peer into the realm of the dead, where dead spirits are. And thus the word unseen. It's unseen, at least to us. Now, when we die, well, that's a different matter. We will be able to see the realm of the unseen. We know that from what? Two individuals. The rich man and Lazarus, right?
Speaking of Hades and the realm of Hades and all, have you heard the people talking about some churches are now teaching, and I don't know if it's Church of Christ or just the denomination, but they're teaching now that when you die, you go straight to heaven with God.
Yes, I have heard that. And they derive that, they believe that when Jesus came forth from the dead, that he emptied the Hadean realm at that time. But to me, the Bible doesn't teach that because of this one reason, because of this verse. I mean, why would you need the keys to open up the unseen realm if it's already what? Been opened. If Jesus emptied Hades when he came forth from the grave, then you wouldn't need a key to open it because there's nobody there. So I would think that this would be a good verse to deal with that, or at least to address that issue.
80-70.
The 80-70 folks.
That also believe that what he was referring to.
And we have lost connection.
We may just have to skip it. Yeah.
All right, so sorry about that. But anyway, so he has the key to open, to unlock. Now, we're not talking about a literal key. You understand that. We're talking about figurative language, but again, releasing, opening the keys of Hades, where spirits are. Spirits aren't dead. I said dead spirits. Spirits aren't dead. The physical body is dead. But he also has the key of death. I take that to mean the grave. The Bible teaches that when the Lord returns, a lot of things are going to happen, and they're going to happen fast. One thing that will happen is the graves will be open, correct? What will be the purpose of the graves opening? So this physical body can come out. I don't care if it's dust. God will have the power to get my body out of the grave, where's my spirit? My spirit's not in the grave. My spirit is either where the rich man is, I hope not, or where Lazarus is in comfort, but it's going to be one of those two places. And so I'm going to be reunited with my body, and that body is going to be changed, because flesh and blood cannot what? Enter heaven. So this, don't ask me to explain it. I have no clue how it's going to happen. But that's the idea here behind verse 18. Would this be comforting to people whose lives were on the line every day? I mean, they face certain death every day. To know that this life is not all there is, that the Lord's going to deal with these persecutors one day, and that you're going to go to a glorious realm, this would give them all sorts of encouragement to remain faithful. I'm the ever-living one, and I have power. These Roman authorities have power that only goes so far. The worst that men can do to you is what? Kill you. That's the worst that man can do to you. They can't take your soul. They can't rob you of heaven. Now again, we're sitting here and none of us are faced with persecution or death. And it's easy to talk about these things. But I mean, you know, when you're in the thick of it and you're dealing with this, I'm sure it's a completely different matter. And that's why we need this today, even though we may not be where we're not where they were then. Who knows, one day we might be. So John, verse 19, what do I want you to do with all this? Write it down. Write it down, John, because you're going to pass this on to these 7 churches. John would like to go there himself, wouldn't he? Why can't he? Why doesn't he just walk over to Ephesus and Laodicea and Smyrna? He's on an island, that's right. He's sort of in Alcatraz. He's sort of in prison. He's been banished there, and he can't walk on water, or he doesn't. So he does the next best thing. Write it down, and then this is going to be taken to the 7 churches. And of course, God is saying, I'm going to preserve it, so folks at Verona, March the 2nd, 2022, can study this as well. If he didn't write it down, there's no way we would know what we wouldn't have revelation. So write the things that you have seen. That is this first vision. Don't leave it out. Now that tense is what? Which thou hast seen. Past tense. And I also want you to write the things which are. Present tense. That is the current state of the churches in Revelation chapters 2 and 3. So write the things which you've seen, that's chapter 1. The things which are, chapters 2 and 3. And the things which shall be hereafter, that's chapters 4 to 22. That's sort of an outline of Revelation. Revelation 1:19 sort of outlines the book for us. And then verse 20, we're thankful that we do have a little bit of explanation for what's what. Now what we would like is for the Lord to have explained everything for us. And there would be no mystery, and we'd all be in agreement. But, you know, we don't have that. But we have verse 20. The mystery of the 7 stars which thou sawest in my right hand. And again, he saw those back in verses 12 and 13. And the 7 golden candlesticks. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches. I think we may have mentioned that last week. There's no consensus as to whether these are literal angels, and they certainly could have been. The word angel simply means messenger. That's all it means, messenger. And so the 7 angels could be, perhaps some believe, the minister, maybe the preacher for each congregation. Or my way of thinking is, if these are individuals, maybe the eldership of each congregation. But take your pick. We really don't know who exactly is referred to by the angels. But I want you to write it down. I want you to know that I am among the churches. As we saw back in verse 13, Jesus is in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, and the 7 candlesticks were the 7 churches. The Lord's among his people, and the Lord certainly is among his people today. All right, that's chapter 1. Your thoughts on Revelation chapter 1? How many more to go? 21 to go. Ma'am?
The stars could be the angels. What did you say?
The 7 stars are the angels of the 7. And some believe, well, it could be literal angels. There's no denying that. It could be, some believe, ministers, or I want to think if it's people, it's talking about the eldership, but that's, we simply don't know. We just really don't know. That's just speculation. But in any event, God is going to see to it that these 7 churches get these 7 letters, and they're to act accordingly once they receive these 7 letters. All right, now chapter 2. Now we start focusing on, we were introduced to the 7 churches in chapter 1. These weren't the only churches on the planet. We made that observation before. But certainly the problems that each of these 7 churches face would be typical of problems that any congregation would face then and even today as well. So, we can take the medicine that each letter gives to them and to us. These 7 letters follow a common pattern. There's a greeting. We would say, dear so-and-so. Well, it's not exactly like that, but there's a greeting. Usually in the letters, before the Lord deals with the bad, he deals with the good. He pats them on the back first, before rebuking them for their problems second. And then he'll wrap up with the encouragement to either keep doing the good you're doing or to repent and straighten up. So that's the general pattern in each of these 7 letters. Now, for the congregations, Jesus both commended and rebuked them. He had something good to say about them, and he addressed some areas that needed correcting. 2 of the 7 churches, the Lord really had nothing bad at all to say about them. Smyrna and Philadelphia. And then 1 congregation, the Lord had nothing good to say about them. You know what that one was? Starts with an L. Laodicea. And of course, we ask ourselves the question, if the Lord were writing letters to churches today, what would he write of us? What would he write of us? Well, we might get a glimpse of that when we look at these letters. Again, when we talk about these cities, they were in Asia Minor, which is what country today? Turkey. This is the country of the nation of Turkey today. So if you have a Bible map, you should see those 7 cities, really not too far from each other, about 40 to 50 miles, not too far from one another. So we begin with Ephesus. That's chapter 2, verse 1. So unto the angel or messenger of the church at Ephesus write these words. Now these letters aren't long, are they? In fact, this first letter only has 7 verses. So not a long letter, but there's a lot, of course, in each letter. This is the congregation in the city of Ephesus. Today, if you go to Ephesus, you will find ruins. It is near the Turkish city of Selçuk, I believe it's called. Has a population of about 36,000, which is about the same, as Tupelo, right? Sort of ballpark, about the same population as Tupelo. And if you can go online, and if you want to go over there, you can book your travel agent. And they've got it all neatly set up for you. If you've got the money, they've got the time. And they've got just everything. They make it very easy to plan a trip like that. and lay it all out for you. Or you can get on your computer and watch it from the comfort of your own home for free.
Do they stay with the Bible?
No. They're going to show you. They're going to show you. Here was the temple of Artemis or Diana. Here was this, and here was that. But these would not be.
So it's sort of open-minded.
Right. These would not be New Testament Christians. No. In fact, I mean, I don't know, but the fellow I sort of did a little research on, I don't even know that they're there for tourism, that you understand, and maybe they are, maybe they're not, but at least you would have an idea. This is where the church was in that city. You would have an idea of the location. Ephesus then, it may be ruins today, but Ephesus then, I'm told, was the fourth most important city in all of the Roman Empire, which was vast. The most important city in the Roman Empire would obviously have been Rome. Rome would have been number one. Alexandria, Egypt would have been second. And I'm taking this person's word for it. I didn't live back then, but so you understand. Antioch of Syria, third. And they say that Ephesus would have been the fourth largest, or the most important city. If you look on a map, Ephesus is right next to the sea, which would mean what as far as trade? I mean, you're going to have a lot of trade, sort of like what New York, New Orleans, cities on the ocean or sea, you're going to be port cities, and so you're going to have a lot of trade coming in. What about wealth? You're going to have a lot of wealth. Where you have trade, if you're on a trade route, you're going to have a lot of wealth. And sad to say, along with wealth often comes crime, corruption, lasciviousness, sin, you name it. It was a wealthy city and a corrupt city. One of the seven wonders of the ancient world was in the city of Ephesus. Know what it was? Temple of Diana or Artemis. I believe Artemis is the Greek word, Diana the Latin or the Roman word. I believe I'm right about that. We're told that it took them 100 years to build that temple. And you might think, well, I mean, they didn't have the equipment then that we have today. It could have been built maybe in a year in our time. Well, I don't know, but you take 100 years, you're going to have, most workers will never see that completed unless they started near the end of the project. 100 years to build a temple, and it was something to see, we are told. Now, it's not something to see today. I mean, you wouldn't be in awe of it today. I mean, you see the ruins of it, but that's about it. So that's the city of Ephesus. Now, the church in Ephesus, where do we first read in the New Testament of Ephesus? What book? The book of Acts. Who established the church in Ephesus? Starts with a P. Paul. Third missionary journey. Second missionary journey, Acts chapter 19, about AD 50, 58 AD. Now, if you'll recall, when Paul went to Ephesus, did everybody welcome him with open arms? I mean, if you're preaching where the temple of Diana is, and you've got people making trinkets to Diana to sell to people, and all of a sudden you come along and say there's one God and Diana is not that one God, you're going to hit them in the pocketbook, and they're going to be what? You hit people in their pocketbook, what happens? MAD, mad. I mean, out for blood. Remember Demetrius and those silversmiths? I mean, if they could have gotten their hands on Paul, he would have been no more. He preached against idolatry, and this was an idolatrous city. Paul was able to stay in Ephesus 3 years, and he had the help of a Christian couple. Remember their names? Aquila and Priscilla. He also had the help of an eloquent speaker. I mean, he could really speak well. Apollos. Timothy would work there some, and tradition says that John himself spent some of his latter years in Ephesus. So Paul helped to establish the church in Ephesus, in AD 58, he wrote a letter back to the church in Ephesus. What is that letter called? Ephesians. He wrote that letter in about AD 64. So about 35 years after Paul left, the Lord writes a second letter to the Ephesians, and that's the letter in Revelation 2, 1 through 7. Here's a church that should have been well instructed, and yet here's a church that had all sorts of problems. So these things says he that holds the 7 stars in his right hand, who walks in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks, that is, the Lord is among his people. This is a letter from the Lord. This is directly from heaven. You don't just read this letter and toss it aside. This isn't junk mail. This isn't spam as we call it today. It's something that you held on to. You paid attention and you heeded for your own good. You heeded the words of this letter. Verse 2, I know what? I know thy works. I believe I'm correct in saying that Jesus said this to all 7 of the churches of Asia. I know thy works. Can we say that truthfully? Do you know everything there is to be known about people? We think we know people by looking at them, but we really don't know. Only the Lord can say, I know, I know. He only knows everything. Notice that Jesus will begin this letter. Does he begin with the bad or the good? The good. He begins with the good. Let's start out on a positive note. And that is a lot of times very wise whenever we are dealing maybe with a difficult situation, or if we have to confront somebody. Adam talked about Nathan and David on Sunday morning, and Nathan did a marvelous job of addressing David's sin. Didn't go on there blasting, but he went there with an illustration that David could not miss, and he didn't miss. So the Lord starts off with the good. Commend where you can. I know your works. I know your works. This tells us they did not have a dead what? Faith. They didn't have a dead. James says that faith minus works is what? Dead. So they didn't have a dead faith. They were a working congregation, a serving congregation. Not only that, I know your labor. There's a difference in work on the one hand and labor on the other hand. Labor means work to the point of exhaustion. I mean, this is a church that was a sacrificing church. They were not lazy. They were not indolent. They worked, and then they really worked. They were working hard. That's great, isn't it? Hope the Lord can say that of us. I know your patience. They were undergoing persecution, and they were hanging in there. They weren't folding. They weren't quitting. They weren't dropping out. Is that a good thing? That's a good thing. I know your works. I know you're working really hard. Your labor. I know your patience. And on top of that, I know that you cannot bear them who are evil. And you've tried those who say they're apostles and are not, and has found them liars. If you recall, when Paul left the elders at Ephesus, he had to leave. In fact, he told them, I'll never see you again this side of heaven. What was their response to that? They were sad. They fell on his neck crying. And we're never going to see you again. Never. They were sad, but before he left them, he warned them of an apostasy that would come, and it would begin within them. That's Acts 20, 28 through 31. False teachers would come in from the outside and even arise from the inside. And so they were fully aware of what was going to happen, and they dealt with this situation. We read it in John. John said, try the spirits, whether they are of God. So what they did to these individuals here. individuals came along and said they were what? They claimed to be what? We're apostles. Well, they put them to the test. Hey, did you see the resurrected Lord? That's one of the signs of what? An apostle. You know, there was just anybody couldn't be an apostle. Well, they put these fellows to the test and found they were just lying. They claimed powers that were not theirs. They wanted to keep the church pure. Is that a good thing? Absolutely, it's a good thing. Absolutely, it's a good thing. You have done well in this area. Verse 3, you have borne, that is, you borne the heat battle of the day. You've had patience, said that in verse 2, reinforces verse 3. And for my name's sake you've worked and have not quit. Whose name's sake? Jesus. Not John's, not theirs. Okay? And that's the way it ought to be. Now, if the letter ended in verse 3, we would say here's just about a perfect church, correct? But there is a nevertheless in verse 4 we'll get to next week. Another word for nevertheless is what? However. But. All these good things, but we've got some areas we really need to work on. We'll pick up in verse 4 next week, Revelation 2, verse 4.